We are saying who are the most players and what characteristics they have. This is not an easy issue because there are a lot of players and there are very vague boundaries, or let's say, between them. We are talking about the governmental players or the state players, for example, politicians or the officials, reps of the civil society, of course, the cultural figures and cultural managers. Those are the leaders of the ideas. We are talking about the representatives of the Ukrainians, both in this country and abroad, who represent different cultural movements and streams, and I would say even sub-Ukrainian identities. It's very difficult to say where the end of one mandate and where the start of the next one. It's very difficult to say how it should be, because in the majority of cases we face a situation when we have to take in consideration the burden of the legacy of the Soviet times, and that means that the Ukrainians have a very low level of trust and confidence in this state. In general, the Ukrainians are very critical about what actually is produced by the public sector. The Ukrainian Institute is a part of the MFA, and the Ukrainian Institute at the same time perceives itself as a cultural or public institution, but at the same time it is a state-run institution. We are going to talk today who are the players involved and how they have to interact between themselves in order to achieve the result we would like to achieve. And we're going to talk about that with Mr. Volodymyr Sheiko, General Director of the Ukrainian Institute, Hanna, Hopko, Chairman of the Verkhovna Rada Committee on Foreign Affairs in the previous 8th convocation. She is a candidate of scientist in social communications, also the Chairman of the Zero Corruption Conference organization. Also, we have the link with Chicago with Ms. Marta Farion, who actually represents the very important institution which helps us to launch a lot of projects beyond the boundaries of business sector, and she is the chairman of the Ukrainian Foundation in North America, which has been supporting the Mohyla Academy for a long many years. I would like to ask our first speaker, Volodymyr, who are the actors or the players, and not to use the old Cossack term, the subjects in this the field of cultural diplomacy, and how they cooperate with each other. Volodymyr, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Yevgeny. I would like to welcome all our audience and the participants of this very important discussion for the Ukrainian Institute, which is a young public institution in Ukraine. You were absolutely right to say, Yevhen, that there are a lot of players in this field. If we are just taking consideration what does cultural diplomacy means, like exchange of cultural potentials of different communities in order to achieve better understanding, mutual understanding, better neighbor conditions, we understand this has never been, and still is not, the monopoly of the state. This is being implemented at the level of the politicians, the level of civil let's say, a community and those ordinary people who are the bearers and carriers of the cultural values and who represent different communities. When we were working on the strategy of the Ukrainian Institute, which has been presented quite recently, we came to understand that we are just one of the players on a very big and huge field, which also includes those subjects which you again mentioned in the beginning of his introductory part. We're talking about the central executive bodies in Ukraine, the MFA, Minister of Culture, Minister of Education, and we are talking about the parliamentary profile committees, Ukrainian Institute, the profile the dedicated public institutions, and our foreign diplomatic corps abroad, the organization of the civil society, both in Ukraine and abroad, and institutes the actors, Ukrainian and the the foreign ones who are the suppliers of the content with which the Ukrainian diplomacy works. Actually, we're talking about the diplomats, mass media, who are the translators and transmission hubs, or the, let's say, big portion of the content we are working with. We are talking about a lot of other actors or players. It will take some time, to enumerate all of this. But the challenge we face for cultural diplomacy per se is the understanding how all those very different subjects and players with different interests, different tastes, if you will, how they can interact with each other in order to be efficient, in order to, in the end of the day, when we have this kind of foreign representative, let's say, facility in Ukraine, could be efficient, not to represent some, let's say, thousand upon thousand Ukrainians abroad, but we have to go in this one and the same direction, along the same lines. So the question is whether the borderline between the cultural diplomacy as a phenomenon, which can exist without any participation or the impact on this part of the government of the state, and when the cultural diplomacy starts as a targeted policy, because we are the organization, a public organization, we have to implement and pursue the state policy and to fill it with the content and the meaning. And we can understand this line because this is the line between different subjects or the actors we are talking about now, and of course between and they are very different interests. In our strategy, we have very ambitious plans that we mentioned that the Ukrainian Institute in the future has to be developed into an institution which would actually give to this activity as a policy certain systemity, certain direction, which could coordinate and manage all our available resources and potentialities, because we cannot any longer rely upon just on our own efforts in the world. And this holds for everyone. Everywhere in the world, the actors could be more efficient if they can use, in a good sense of that, the available resources, potentialities or potentials, the agendas, if you will, in order to achieve the common objective, common goal, because we are on our own. Somebody on his or her own can do less than if we join our pool our efforts. This is the topic of discussion during our previous discussions. One of those took place 1 week back. We mentioned that all those talks are very valuable for our institution because it helps us to form our strategy. And this feedback from the expert community, from actors of the cultural diplomacy, is critically important to us. This is kind of the framework we're working in, and I hope I answered your question. Thank you very much indeed. I would like to give the floor to Hanna, please. Thank you very much, Yevhen, and I would like to thank the Ukrainian Institute for the fact that they presented their strategy till the year 2024. This is absolutely important document, and like any strategy in this changing world where we face a lot of the challenges, it is going to be further polished, but the reality might be changed its wording and something like that. But anyway, I'm sure that we have a kind of roadmap which we are going to follow in the future. Well, actually, about 2 years ago with Volodymyr, we were talking about the 100th anniversary of Shedrik and the cultural diplomacy of Ukraine. But I believe that was the centennial anniversary, and they were talking about the Ukrainian state. I believe that it's very important, despite the fact that the aggressive country of Russia, counter-aggression of Russia, not only they try through their onslaught and the everyday bombardment or the shooting, they try to influence the humanitarian policy of Ukraine as well. Why I was talking about the Shedriks or those carols, it's not only important to win on the battlefield, but also we have to strengthen our identity through the cultural diplomacy. When we witness their, let's say, loss, when we were forced, the whole country, because of the Holodomor and the genocide, we had to, we actually lost for some time our statehood, but we did not lose for a minute the state of our spirit. And when we celebrate 150th anniversary of Andriy Sheptytsky, his birthday and his contribution to the development of the state between the two world wars, we have to take pride and understand that cultural diplomacy is a part of the policy of soft force, so to say, soft politics. And I have with me these cases in Belarus, Georgia, Moldova, Kazakhstan, and Russia. What is the charisma of Ukraine, the trendsetter of democratic processes, and how we can influence the transformations to take place in the Russian Federation? Because for Belarus or Kazakhstan, it is obvious that the issue of the freedom of speech, the fact that Ukrainians can freely speak their mind, and our connections and links with the European Union, we actually automatically obtain the visa-free let's say, regime with many countries, Ukraine could actually pose itself as a leader in many countries. And I believe that it's very important for us in our foreign policy to use cultural diplomacy in order to send more clear signals regarding our identity as a leader at least in the Eastern Partnership, because between Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, Ukraine has a lot of, let's say, advantages. Speaking about the membership in the European Union and NATO, which is also one of our priorities fixed in our constitution, I believe that within the strategy you described a few minutes ago, there are several geopolitical centers for which the art, the cinema, through those vehicles we can actually convey the message of Ukraine, of geopolitical significance of Ukraine. Also, I would like to talk today about the next year. We are going to celebrate 30th years of our independence. I believe this is a very good opportunity to send to the whole world this signal. What is the soft policy of Ukraine, and what is the prerequisite of our success for the whole European continent, I dare say that, and for all the international space. We actually addressed, we came up with the declaration in support of some ethnic people in the Russian Federation. I believe that we have to have some, let's say, offensive approach in our foreign policy, not just to talk about some of our miracles we managed to implement. Also, we are going to mark next year certain anniversary since the Chernobyl accident, and we plan to go to the Chernobyl area because there are a lot of connections the world over. They're talking about between Chernobyl and corruption. And corruption actually erodes democracy, and we would like to demonstrate, we plan to demonstrate that sometimes our foreign partners instrumentalize corruption, and they say we cannot give this let's say, the regime of the special partner, or they cannot become the candidate for membership in the EU because of corruption. I believe that there are a lot of chances we lost after a special Budapest meeting, and we were talking with Volodymyr about that. We prepared a kind of catalog. We had some kind of art contest, the posters of different posters of different artworks. About 450 designers presented their works, and 300 best of those were included in this catalog. Corruption and digitalization, corruption and security, safety. We could select the best, the artworks from the authors from Mexico, Uruguay, and other countries to demonstrate how globally Ukraine approaches those issues. We already had a meeting with our ambassador in Japan, Mr. Korsunsky, and they actually agreed to help us to have some kind of joint event dedicated to some ecological issues as well, because this is something which can unite us all. What is also important in my mind, I believe, coordination within this country to make this synergy give better results. In MFA, in our Committee of Foreign Affairs, we had several round tables, interaction of the, public and non-public institutions, promotion of the interests of Ukraine through cultural diplomacy and information policy. And then it seemed to me that very important was, and still is, the ability inside different departments and agencies like the Ukrainian Institute, the National Institute of Memory, the Institute of Book, which actually specify the books, which in different languages of the world can convey the message of what we have in Ukraine. And our wonderful writers like Oksana Zabushko, Andrei Kurkov, and many others, they would be consonant with the world trends available today. And it seems to me that would be nice if the special parliamentary committee would more often collect all the tools available to determine the strategies. There are different strategies, Institute of Book or Institute of Memory, but are they synergized in order to make the policy of Ukraine as a subject of international scene, so that this tune, sometimes the conductor is required to make each musical instrument to sound properly, and the more so that after the Revolution of Dignity, we also created the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation and many modern other institutions, like the support of the cinematography, Invisible Battalion, and there are other Donbass. They should be on the screen. We have to demonstrate those because the world is fed up already and tired of the Russian war. But Ukraine also means the space technologies, IT sphere, the design. For example, my costume has been designed by the Ukrainian costume designer. So we have a lot to share with the world outside our borders. I would also to say that very important within the MFA there is the public council, the diplomatic academy. We also have to achieve better coordination of the efforts. We have to take care of training of the personnel, and within the cultural diplomacy framework we can come up with more training sessions. But what we need, the boldness to be bold to openly convey to the world the message that the Ukraine is not the victim, is a contributor to the international security, the trend center, and the success of Ukraine can become the trigger to transform the Russian Federation. Once it is going to happen, and I'm certain that the Kievan Rus will will win over Moscow. I know that there are a lot of people who are armed with the necessary strategy. And what I would like to add, that there are a lot of the ambassadors who saw the announcement about this event of ours, can we make happen that in Germany can pay more attention to that or some other country. And there is some hyperbolized understand that the Ukrainian Institute can cover all the issues. When MFA said that this is our strategy, this is our priority, this is being done by the Ukrainian Institute, the Institute of Memory, or Institute of the Book. In this case, when we have this kind of good coordination, including different embassies, which is very important, and we have to make use of Ukrainian diaspora with all their potentialities, and the World Congress of Ukrainians, Marta, is going to say how she tries to promote Ukraine in different platforms. Here we can save a lot of resources. I just recently read the article how Russia was going to change their humanitarian policies. They are not going to have just different, concerts of balalaikas or some kind of the choirs involved. They are going to change the tune of the concert because this doesn't give them any benefits or the part of the policy. And I believe Ukraine has a lot to bring to the world in the better synergy inside the state agencies and bodies. With the strategy in place, we need the will to win. And this is not so much what I said the rest of Volodymyr, generally speaking. In the direction we have to consider, let's say, the famine let's say, the genocide, and you remember even Portugal considered this big, great feminist genocide. After we celebrated with a certain anniversary, marked this anniversary of the famine. And we have to do everything in order to strengthen our position. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Hanna, Marta. What is your vision? Good afternoon to everyone from the distant Chicago, but very close to Ukraine. I'm happy that I've been invited to participate in this talk, very important talk. I'm honored and privileged to be part of that. And as representative of the American diaspora, the diaspora has developed a lot. Millions of Ukrainians you can find the world over. In Chicago, per se, we have hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. Definitely not all of them take special interest in Ukraine, but there are a lot of people who actually were members of different public organizations, and they complete their studies, and they have a chance to promote Ukrainian interests the world over in different countries of the world. This is the very important asset, capital, if you will, which can be used by Ukrainians. I'm talking about Ukrainian diaspora. Ukraine used to look at diaspora as something, let's say, the younger brother or sibling or the child with a respective attitude to that. But the people who were working on the message about Ukraine, they didn't have a big support to a large extent from Ukraine. 30 years have passed, and we all those that time had to try to find in Ukraine some very interesting materials in order to help promote the Ukrainian message. But one of the biggest problems we face is we need to identify what is the message and the brand of Ukraine to be promoted, because the players in this game, and there are a lot of those, but we have to coordinate their efforts, how we can coordinate those efforts, how can we implement this strategy which has been presented. I would like to welcome the Ukrainian Institute. For 30 years we've been dreaming, 30 years of independence of Ukraine, we have been dreaming that the day would come when Ukraine will establish such an institute like the Institute of Cervantes in Spain or Alliance Française, and we can see how they work, how they operate. And at last, in Ukraine, we have the vision and understanding that we need to open or establish, set up such an institute. However, there are a lot of what we require, a lot of needs. But now we have to present implementation of certain program to disseminate that brand and the message of Ukraine. Hanna already mentioned that Russia allegedly they are changing their strategy regarding their policy, their message. They have been very aptly doing that up till now, and this is a problem to us. Just to give you several examples, the city of Chicago is the twin city of Ukraine, of Kyiv, I mean, and here we represent Ukraine because this is the official program associated with the city. And although this is the public organization, we have about 35 twin cities, and I believe that such program the world war could be very instrumental, help us a lot. Just a few examples. One of the twin cities of Chicago is Moscow, and for each program we have to have some funds, because we do everything free. We are volunteers, and we approach different companies U.S. and different Ukrainian donors, Ukrainians, to help us with some of the to offer some financial assistance. But the program with Moscow, I mean, has a very serious Russian financial support, either through their oligarchs or their organization. They can work miracles. They can do fantastic things. For example, famous musicians visit with the symphony orchestra, let's say, in the best audiences, in best halls, and they after the concerts they organize different parties dedicated to this or another a musician or conductor, and they invite the business elite or cultural elite of this city, and everything on a very high level. You have to pay for that. And this is a part of the image of the state, of the country. And by the way, last year, on the initiative of our consulate and our general consul, she left our country, she works now in Ukraine, but on her own initiative, we managed to organize a special reception for the, let's say, for Kirill Karabets, a famous Ukrainian conductor, well known the world over. And Ukraine has to support him and promote him. How to do that? This is a different pair of shoes, a different story, because he has a very good reputation the world over. And on initiative of the former consul, we organized this reception, and we invited the business elite, politicians, and this is just one very small example. Another example, what this Twin Cities program managed to do. A decade ago, 10 years ago, we organized an extraordinary exhibition of avant-garde modernism since the turn of the 20th century. We are talking about the masterpieces of the world caliber, and we organized that exhibition with the assistance of the Ministry of Culture and the main museum, respective museum in Kyiv. 45,000 people became visitors of this museum, including tourists from different countries of the world. And all this was done with the support of the Department of Culture of the city of Chicago. Those are just two examples. Those examples are galore, but they require a lot of efforts and finances. But what is very important here, I mean, the role of the diplomatic corps of Ukraine is of critical importance here. The general consulates and embassies must become those centers which are going to cooperate with the Ukrainian Institute. However, they try to do their best, but they lack different materials. Some video trailers, whatever, different booklets, but all this must be based on some strategy, on some message, on some identification of Ukraine. I really welcome all those who are involved in this effort, especially those ministers who are part of making, developing the strategy. And I'm really happy to hear that the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy will be part of that as well. I read one thing, that we have to start with the following: to give, to send the message to all the people in Ukraine, the information about Ukraine. I mean, the history of Ukraine. And I thought maybe we should not try to let's say to condense everything into, let's say, 20 or 25 pages. Nobody will read that long story. You know, they like the very concise, laconic, let's say, information. For example, what do you know about Germany? What do you know about France or Italy? The people do not know about that. But we can ask them just tell us what you know about Germany. They would say, okay, Mercedes, BMW, Beethoven, Wagner, maybe they will name even the rock group Scorpions. About France, you know yourself. They will mention different fromages, cheeses or wines, to say nothing about Italy, Versace, let's say Spain, El Prado, etc. And in the United States, we don't have to say, because they actually went over the whole world with their McDonald's, blues, and music, etc., etc. Each country also had very negative aspects to them. And Russia now is carrying out a very aggressive policy in order to demonstrate Ukraine as an unstable country, to show Ukraine as an unstable country, which is living through occupation that they should not rely upon Ukraine, etc., etc. And this is their policy. And you know yourselves how they pursue and how they use this misinformation in the world. But the country which I mentioned a few minutes ago, Germany, France, and Italy, they also had very negative aspects to their history. For example, Hitler, Nazi, Sicilian mafia, corruption, collaboration with Hitler, let's say illegality, a lot of offshore operations, transactions, etc. But those countries managed to change that negative, to change their reputation, so that everybody could consider them see them in a different way. And Ukraine also has such a fantastic opportunity to do same. I don't want to emphasize only negative aspects that Ukraine failed to do this or that. Let's be honest. 30 years of independence following a very long colonialism. 30 years is nothing, but a lot has been changed over this period of 30 years, and people didn't know before those 30 years anything about Ukraine. Now everybody knows about Ukraine. This is a big positive aspect. That's why if you're talking about the potential for promotion of Ukrainian image and brand, this potential is huge. Yes, Ukraine has a very agricultural potential, and they can supply their metallurgical products and the grain the world over. It's very easy for you businessmen to come here, and very convenient to be involved in business. Ukraine has more than 50, let's say, discoveries or inventions, which it world caliber. But Ukraine also one of the leaders in IT. Also, we have to promote this sphere the world over, because this tells something to the people in the world. And how many people the world over know that rich Yudley is from Ukraine, that the programmers from Ukraine are those inventors of different innovations in the IT field, even WhatsApp, pay up, all those who started Wi-Fi, etc. Articles are published about that in Ukraine, but nobody knows about that abroad. I would like to suggest to shoot kind of documentary on newsreel about those, let's say, discoverers or inventors. It's very difficult to be involved in propaganda about yourself, but maybe we can pay to some agencies, let's say in the United States or in Germany, for them to do that, to promote all that information. Hanna Hopko mentioned that we have to coordinate the efforts because there are a lot of players. But what kind of players? Who has to promote the image of Ukraine? First of all, we have to identify what kind of image we are talking about, what we would like to have, what Ukraine would like to have the world to know about this country, and who must be those players, how to implement this message, how to convey this message. I would say that first of all, the diplomatic corps, not only diplomatic corps, but everyone has to do that, because there are a lot of different organizations who themselves create this or another content. For example, the Western Enterprise Fund several years actually released wonderful videos about Ukraine, about the small and medium business and tourism, and they actually gave those videos to the respective ministry. But those products, let's say video products, have been shelved because our council didn't receive any materials of that kind. I don't want to abuse your time, but those are my ideas and thoughts to the effect that the diaspora has done a lot already. And we should think about the culture of Ukraine not only for the diaspora in the United States or elsewhere. We have to go beyond the boundaries or limits of Ukrainian diaspora as well. Thank you very much, Marta, for your introductory speech. Also, I would like to pose a question to the Director General of the Ukrainian Institute, and then maybe we give a chance to our audience to ask some questions. May I remind you that we have our meetings transmitted both in YouTube and in Facebook, so we can use those social networks to ask your questions. Part of them would be offered to our guests. I would like to draw attention to two cases in the new history of Ukraine. If we take in consideration the Caucasus, we have a lot of historical links and ties with Armenia. There was a huge Armenian diaspora in Ukraine, but in the newest novel history, very close relations with Georgia, between Ukraine and Georgia. The Ukrainian contribution to Georgian fight for the independence and the Georgian contribution into the fight, into the struggle of Ukraine against the Russian imperialism was very noticeable in Georgia during the period which was historical or even historic for Georgia. And in those days, actually, we had a chance to become noticeable in Georgia, inside that country. In Ukraine, Georgia have very broad contacts on the personal level. We can see the presence of Georgian culture, including the Georgian cuisine and all the way up to the Georgian culture and art. At the same time, when for Ukraine, it was very important to have the support of the Western partners back in 2014, when the reputation of other countries was being formed in the eyes of Ukrainians. We did not have a pronounced policy on the part of many Western countries. The years 2014, 2015, those were the years when the reputation of different countries were formed in the eyes of Ukrainians, and they actually they lost the opportunity to have a positive image, even if we're talking well-known institutions. So my question to Volodymyr is, how can take in consideration not only the domestic stakeholders, there are a lot of those, and of course they are going to exert a lot of efforts to become to make their voice be heard, but how we can hear those for whom the consumption of the Ukrainian product could be important, how we can hear the Americans, the French, or the people from the Kazakhstan, I would say, toward whom we could actually direct our efforts, how we can understand what is important for them, not to become the heroes of the fairy tales about the, let's say, the stork and the fox. Thank you, Yevhen. The simple answer is to ask the questions. We cannot just use the presumptions of the cultural diplomacy. something must be done in addition to that. What we are doing in the Ukrainian Institute, all the work we're carrying out, and this pertains to any kind of public policy, it should not be based on the presumptions or assumptions, but hard data, which we could obtain it from those whose opinions were important to us. And it was a very correctly put question, I believe. What Ukraine herself believes to be important in the realm of culture the world over, what would be interest for Ukraine to hear. Those are two different things which we permanently dwell upon in different of our talks. For example, the Ukrainian sector of culture and science, or the civil society, what they offer to us and what format can be used by the Ukrainian Institute to implement those ideas they brought. Very often this does not coincide with the expectations of our foreign partners to whom we target our efforts. So partial answer to your question, Yevgen, is this must be kind of bilateral co-creation, let's say, co-organization of some event or anything like that, when the Ukrainian Institute can offer a certain package of the possibilities, opportunities, projects, activities, and maybe together with our recipients or foreign institutions, we can select what would be most, let's say, topical and easily understood or perceived. And that's how we guide our efforts. How to make ourselves heard. We have to make some poll to answer questions through different questionnaires or polling. What Ukraine has been doing over the last 30 years, but which was kind of fragmentary. We failed to do some kind of the fundamental research or study of that. I'm talking about other countries. In many actors who work in the cultural diplomacy, we just try to feel our way, just basing ourselves on some of the previous experience, of the old experience of some experts. This is not the way we should follow. Only in the year 2015, some kind of study has been carried out how Ukraine is perceived in foreign countries. But that research was not really profound or fundamental, but that resulted in the thesis that Ukraine is well known to the world only because of the poverty in this country or the war with Russia. And this we have to take into consideration what we can use. If we are talking about some kind of the research project this year, we'd like to revisit our efforts. We are talking about Poland, Germany, Turkey, Japan, the United States, and other countries, where we would like to make sure we know what is the interest to Ukraine on the part of the foreign audience or the expert community, institutes of culture, the diplomatic corps, the mass media, etc. What do you already know about Ukraine? What cultural content, what kind of content they would like to have from us or hear about us, so they can offer what Marta was talking about, that the strategy which has been recently announced be filled with a specific program content which is so far based on our own assumptions. I repeat myself. Thank you.
I would like now to speak about important word in the headline of our meeting. We are speaking about synergy. Michael Werther says that the strategy is the answer to three questions: what should be done, what should not be done, and in what we have this synergy. If we are speaking about synergy, how it appears in interaction of the players. In what way should they cooperate in conditions when we have such diverse interests and so low level of trust among different institutions, between different players? If we look at any interaction in the public sector, we see a lot of different opinions. Where can we find this energy and how this trust should appear? And I would like to ask Hanna, what should become a source of this trust, a basis for synergy between different players, both public and non-public, or state or non-state players? After the Revolution of Dignity, we were trying to build a national team when the representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, public diplomacy, the representatives of different factions and groups, and power and opposition, administration of the president, now we have office of the president, they should clearly understand that there should be one voice policy, one position to support our national interests. Evidently, there are different values, and they should unite these players, those actors, clear understanding that we should reinforce the subjectivity of Ukraine and to reinforce our statehood in order that inside the country we have this synergy between different institutions. From the very start, for us, it was a task when we understand that we have a fight and we should not only repel military aggression, we should fight for our place in history. And here we may mention those important articles from the newspaper and to Ras, my sister Sophia, Ukraine Incognito in English. I provided it in US and France to top officials. So answering your question, I would like to say that it is important inside Ukraine to build this political culture of interaction between the players. When we are speaking about the situation, how to get the victory over our enemy in Donbass, it was said that security first. It should include comprehensive ceasefire, and we should speak about Ukraine first. And Volodymyr, as the director of the institute, he deals with the implementation of the strategy. He coordinates his actions with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and there should be good relations between the actors, important actors, such as the Book Institute, the Institute of Memory, and also in Ukraine, sometimes people just deal with their own issues. For example, they work in the institute, and when you go abroad to Diaspora, there are several Ukrainian groups, and they have their own views, their own history, traditions, and I was surprised. Last year, I attended a conference in Toronto for support of reforms, and there was a photo on Facebook, and some Ukrainians came to me and they asked why I took picture with those people. But I was in Canada, in Toronto, for the first time. And they said, you do not know about these people, but I do not know, and I should not know about their relations. I have my own agenda. And I saw that there is some people's format, like in our institutions. In 2018, when we gathered all actors of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Information, the Ministry of Culture, and the representatives of all the institutions, the Ukrainian Cultural Fund, and there was direct question, do you have a comprehensive single strategy? What brand, as Marta said, what brand we promote in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021? For example, 100 years ago, it was Shedrikson. And when we nearly lost Ukrainian statehood, Shedrik traveled the capitals of the world, and even Queen of Belgium said that when she heard such music, if there is people who have such wonderful music, they will do everything possible in order to help these people to gain their statehood. That's why I believe that our internal domestic culture and this interinstitutional cooperation between directors. There was a visit of the minister to Poland, and a joint declaration was signed about Lublin Triangle. This is a good initiative. Poland is our strategic partner, Lithuania, a Marshall Plan, and also there is an issue, for example, about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, whether it is capable to provide this sense. For example, to say, Vladimir, we signed this joint declaration, and now we have an important issue. In Poland, they opened a new building, and there will be an opportunity to place the office of the Ukrainian Institute there. And it will depend on our bureaucracy, where they will be able to work on a roadmap, and from time to time they should coordinate their actions and correct their policy. So there should be maturity of state people and their ability to play at international arena as one team. And we have less resources than the Russian Federation, but if we have more than 15 or 20 million people diaspora, we will provide a clear signal. We will show that we have proper things to do. We know what to do, and we will have the synergy, because we understand that there is a military front, there is diplomatic front, and cultural diplomacy is one of the elements of reinforcement of this charisma of Ukraine, when you may mildly, softly reach those goals. That's why it's a pity that Ukrainian Parliament and the Committee of Foreign Affairs throughout this year, they didn't pay enough attention to those efforts. We would like to see more coordination. There is interparliamentary assemblies, the Council of Europe, NATO, OSCE, where we could provide part of the initiatives. And for example, the release of Ukrainian prisoners, there were some exhibitions, some demonstrations of films, and this is the influence to reach better results. And I believe that we have 3 years of the Ukrainian Institute, and compared with the Institute of Goethe or French Cultural Center, British Cultural Center, it is not a lot, but there is a wonderful strategy, and time is needed, and also the work should be coordinated with the analytical centers. Because, for example, soft power of Ukraine in the region, this research, this is about not to lose resources. 55 experts were surveyed, and all diplomatic institutions and the Ukrainian Institute should take this research into account. And also there should be political will of the officials to identify Ukraine as the leader. It should be felt, and in all the capitals they can get the signal, and then we may build a strategy with all the instruments and tactical steps. And we have institutions in Ukraine for this, and we may involve financing for this. I would like to add that we didn't say anything about the role of the government and the members of the parliament. When they travel abroad and they deliver their speeches, there are interviews with them and how they represent Ukraine there. I would like to ask that they should have unique position abroad, one position, because when representatives of the Verkhovna Rada come to some country and they start to speak, and they say that you should not trust other people from Ukraine or about big corruption, and later on they ask for help from, for example, from USA, and we say, why are you saying this? Why are you speaking against Ukraine publicly? So the members of the government and the members of the Verkhovna Rada, they should present the strategy, the message about Ukraine. They should understand the strategy clearly. Thank you very much for this consideration from the country where political tradition of cooperation between opponents is significant, and we may say that this provided systemic results in the past. One more question. I would like to voice it. This is from Washington, from Diana Karmazin, about the importance of increase of sponsorship of cultural diplomacy from Ukrainian business, and what are the obstacles and how it looks on the side of Ukrainian business. Maybe this is the last question to you during this discussion. Thank you. This is a part of the broader issue about public-private partnership between Ukrainian Institute and other state institutions in Ukraine and business. And this is a painful issue. I shouldn't hide it. And from the start, my counterpart said about the low trust of society, of business to state institutions. And sometimes we feel this. And they don't feel good about cooperation with state institutions. And the biggest problem here is Ukrainian bureaucracy, and it is difficult to work with the sponsor money that is got by state institutions. And now we communicate with several foreign institutions. We speak about future partnership in several programs, but I understand that sometimes it is impossible because the Ukrainian budget legislation, budget system does not allow to freely use this money. Also, there are many limitations imposed for procurement and contractual relations, and I understand business that is not ready to transfer the money to the institution because it will go to treasury accounts, and there is a risk that treasury won't be ready to pass through these payments, and all the activities that this money will be used for should be coordinated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Supervisory Board and other bodies, and there is a risk that those goals won't be reached in the Ukrainian Institute. And there is political instability. This is a big factor. And business signals this, and the partners we worked last year with. And when some political crises appear, business thinks 10 times whether they should cooperate and finance the needs of the state institution, even if they have covenant interests with us. This is a big systemic problem. It won't be resolved only by forces of the Ukrainian Institute, even by forces of several ministries. This is a big systemic problem. This is not evident for our foreign counterparts because they do not understand why the Ukrainian Institute can pay through invoices. Why we may pay for services only by sharing the originals of the agreements at the Atlantic Ocean. Only then we may pay 2,000 euros for some banal service. I would like to provide such a brief example. We have such a wonderful project. We are trying to implement it with Harvard University, with the Research Institute. One of the obstacles is that the Ukrainian state that only has 30 years, they demand from Harvard University statute documents that are dated back to 1650. And they have it in their archives, and Ukraine is much younger than Harvard University, but they demand that they should prove that they exist, that they have some statutory documents, and it's not a joke. 1 month was spent in order that our colleagues from Harvard went to this archive and got this statute of 1650, and they sent a copy to us. How do we look like in their eyes? I don't want even ask about this. So these are the obstacles. This is not just technical thing. These are things that create image of Ukraine as a partner, and we are representatives of this country. And these macabre procedures, there are some guesses. They say maybe you have some corruption there because you undergo such procedures and force us to follow such procedures. One more question: is this only about money or other resources? We see that other resources are lacking in Ukrainian institutions, or some rules are lacking. Should we have something else on the list? Also, trust is needed. This is a resource that should be not only trust between people, because sometimes the institutions are weak and a lot depends on people, and people leave, and then these connections are lost. So there should be sustainability, and no one wants to invest in institutions if they do not know whether these institutions survive in the future. This is an important aspect of institutional maturity and maturity of those people on which the institution depend. Stakeholders, we mentioned the synergy between them is crucially important, because without this, we will live from one day to the next, and there won't be this, we won't be able to create this lasting partnership. Thank you very much for this answer. Thank you for participation in today's discussion. This was one more discussion, I hope not the last one. We speak about the prospects for the Ukrainian Institute, the new institution that starts its work in the sphere of cultural diplomacy. And today we had the director of the Ukrainian Institute, Volodymyr Sheiko, head of the committee of Verkhovna Rada on foreign affairs of the previous convocation, and Hopko, and Marta, Farion, member of the council of directors, Western NIAS and Enterprise Fund, and the head of Kyiv-Mohyla Foundation in America. And we thank for participation in this discussion, those who watched us through YouTube and Facebook. Thank you, those who asked questions, and those who will ask questions in the future. Till the next time, goodbye. Have a nice day.